First of all, I wanted, I appreciate the support, guys. Wow. I know that some of you are here probably just to see what I'm going to do, but it's great. I'm glad to see you all here. And I was leaving the house this morning, working on it up until the last minute, and getting dressed, throwing my jacket on, and went to go get a cup of water, and I picked it up, and I'm like, that's when I knew I was going to have a problem initially. So I was good until then, and then, oh boy. Well, it was about a couple months ago that I was asked to do a presentation on what was called Satan's Deceptions. I shortened it up, put it Deceptions. I think you'll see later on as we go into it what exactly it's talking about. For the kids, because this is a little bit, I'm hoping to make it shorter than what I think it's going to be. I've put a couple little things in there. If you're paying attention and you see something that doesn't look right, you go, raise your hand. Anybody that does that, I think there's 3 or 4 of them in there. I got something for you afterward. Okay? So if you're paying attention, you see it, there's going to be something that just doesn't quite fit, and be looking for that. We all get deceived. There's nobody that's exempt from that. And I didn't know that actually there was so much information on this subject, and I never really looked into it until, of course, I was given this particular subject. Put a couple quotes in there. The greatest deception of men suffer is from their own opinions. Anybody agree with that? It's not a shame to be deceived, but it is a shame. It is to stay in the deception. Questions are only offensive to those who have something to hide. I found that on Google, and I happen to know that guy, so I had to throw that one in there. Can somebody help me out with texts? I'm going to have you guys read the text as I go through. Any of the kids want to try? Yeah?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:2.
1:1.
No. The earth was without form and a void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
And God said, "Let there be light."
I put those texts in there because, and I don't know if there's any specific significance to that at all, and Pastor Ken would be able to tell me that right away, I'm sure. I noticed that darkness was first. Why that is, I don't know. But when God spoke light into the darkness, that's when we saw what's called contrast. He speaks light into existence. That's the first thing that he creates in our creation story. Light, of course, is what makes everything visible, beautiful. You don't stumble in the dark. You don't have a trouble seeing those things that are imperceivable in the dark. The Bible contrasts light and darkness. Go ahead, and you guys want to read that one?
Jesus said, For everyone that doeth evil hateth in the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be removed.
But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made many manifest that they are wrought in God.
In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. So what I'm seeing in the Bible, and kind of what we have in the world too, and that is that when you have light and you have darkness, kind of compared to what this drawing is, you have what we call truth. Truth is light, darkness is darkness, and there's a distinction, and it's easy to tell. But when you mingle them, that is deception. Somebody else want to read?
For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion hath light with darkness?
The light of the body is the eye. If therefore then thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light.
But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted through the simplicity that is in Christ. So there's something to do with the mind that actually gives us the ability. In our minds, we determine what it is that is truth and error, what's deception, what's not. It's when we get these light bulb moments, those become convictions. What our mind does, it records, processes, analyzes, creates. It's a command center for our bodies and for everything that we go to do. But it is also programmable. We get our beliefs, our emotions, our convictions are all stored within the mind. The Bible tells us to guard your minds against deception. I threw this one in there because I thought it was kind of, can you guys read that all right? The point is, it's all here, your mind. You, all your beliefs, your accomplishments, your memories, everything that you do, everything you are, even your destiny, is determined on what's in your heart or in your mind. I got a $1 bill for anybody that can tell me who this is. Anybody recognize that picture? George Washington. Well, not exactly. No guesses? Who? No, not quite. George W.F. Hagel. Anybody ever hear of him? You know what he's famous for? Born in 1770, he's the one that's given credit for the dialectic, the famous dialectic, or the principles of change, which is how you change society, for example, or how one can change the mind of another. It's a simple process. It's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Anybody can tell me what thesis means? An idea? Okay. What's then the antithesis? Yeah, it's an idea, and then it's an idea against, or you can have, it's like a pro and a con, maybe. Okay. What's that? Yeah, right, a dichotomy. Well, Hegel studied this out, and he figured out that if you take a thesis or you take an idea, you oppose it with another idea, you can actually make a new idea, which sounds really simple, but this happens all the time. A thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is how social change is made. Anybody ever have any experience in social engineering? Am I talking about a subject that it's not something, hardly anybody ever looks into it, and this is why it's so easy to pull over. I drew a little diagram on it, and you guys, I apologize up front, but I'm going to go through this system several times until it's going to seem like, okay, we got it, but I want everybody to get it, because if you understand this particular cycle that we go through, then when you leave here, you can look at everything in life and you can start picking it out. And this is how it works. You have a left, a right, and a center. In politics, or when you listen to the news, doesn't that sound familiar? Left, right, and center? Okay. Well, let's say that conservative Christians are the right. Am I wrong? Right? And the left would then be, what's that? Liberals, or, I don't know. Let's just throwing this out there, right? Well, they may be opposing in their belief systems. But if you take and introduce one idea from the left, oppose it with the right, you create conflict. And conflict in the mind creates an open area for compromise. And you come up with a new center or synthesis. And this process, was I clear on that as far as how that works? If you go left, right, and center, if you go left and right, you create a center. If the center right here is where you start again, and again, and again, and again, you're moving in one direction. And you're changing society, you're changing minds, you're changing the way things happen. And it happens multiple times, sometimes in one generation, and it also happens throughout the generations. And this is how we see change. It can work both directions. Truth and error become a new truth when you combine them. This is deception. The Hegelian principle of change says if we have an agenda, let's say, for example, this is what we want to be our outcome, okay? Then that's what we call our truth in a thesis, antithesis, synthesis scenario. A thesis is you create a problem that in some cases will induce fear. Fear is an emotional reaction. It's something that isn't necessarily logically controlled. Antithesis introduces and pushes a solution to the problem, okay? So you create a problem, you push a solution, and synthesis, the desired outcome is achieved. We also call this problem, reaction, solution, and that's what I'm going to use basically throughout the rest of this demonstration. Create a problem related to what you want. Get a reaction to the problem you created, and introduce the solution to the problem, which is what you wanted to begin with. So if I wanted to, for example, I threw this in as it's a really easy demonstration. It's oversimplified, but I think maybe you can get it real fast, and that is that you own a Corvette, for example. I want it. Let's say I'm gonna use your bike. You rode in on a bike, right? What kind of bike do you have? A Vulcan? Okay. And what would you say if I offered you $2,000 for it? What would you say? Get another one? Well, what if I went somehow and I got a hold of your bike and I made it run terribly? And you took it into the shop, and I actually told the guy that you were taking it to, like, tell him it's done. It's over. The bike it's going to cost you $30,000 to fix it. You don't want it, right? And you leave the shop, and I'm like, well, you want $2,000 for it or not? You might change your mind. My offer might look better, okay? Am I making sense? I mean, is this something that, now, of course, you have to be a little diabolical to want to do this, but then again, what are we talking about? Gas companies, for example. A gas company stages a controlled explosion, which makes a lot of smoke. They advertise a shutdown at the refinery due to a catastrophe, okay? You were told that there is a fuel shortage, and if you want gas, it's going to cost you up to $4 more at the pump. You're relieved to accept a $2 price increase. Now, if they'd come to you to start with and said, you know what, we're going to up our price $2 a gallon, what would everybody say? Let's start looking for fuel somewhere else, right? But these things happen. In government, in the world, et cetera, the picture gets bigger. The agenda, for example, and we've seen this, I'm going to use Germany, for example, back in World War II. This is what happens. The government wanted centralization of power. They have an agenda. They create a manufactured terrorist threat. Antithesis would be repressive police state, remove the freedoms to transfer power from the many to the few. It works as simple as that. I left diagram in there by accident, but problem, thesis, antithesis, solution, that's what they equal. And it's always in a triangular situation, and I'm putting that there, and it'll be a few more times. Is this starting to make sense as to that process? I was working on a script a few years ago for a project we called The Adversary. And for that, I had to start researching what it was that happened in heaven when their first rebellion was started. We all know the story of who started it, and we know the players. But when I started reading through it, I had to try and make sense, because if you're going to try and create a script for a play, for example, you're going to have to understand the subject, and I really didn't understand it. I was trying to figure out why in the heavens, where everything, sorry, I apologize for this, I didn't realize the pictures I was using were going to come out really grainy like that, but I couldn't figure out why in a place like heaven you could come up with something that was so diabolical. What could actually destroy the peace and happiness of a place like heaven when nobody should have a problem, right? I mean, this is where we all want to go, so what is it about where we're going that became that way? And heaven is supposed to be, right, the peaceful, the beautiful, the eternal, where everything goes right, nobody gets hurt, everybody means well. Well, it starts out that we had the most influential, beautiful, powerful, created being that God ever made. He wanted what he didn't have. He didn't start with, but it became that way. He started to see that, hey, you know what? Adoration looks pretty good. I like the attention that people give me. People give me respect. They give me honor. They give me, well, pretty much whatever I ask them for, because whatever I've asked for has always been God's will to start with. But it became a problem when he started pushing his own agenda, and he started taking authorization to do things and make claims and maybe make commands that wasn't his. What he ended up wanting was something that he couldn't have. He wanted worship. So he studied. When he was denied, he studied. And his mind, his mind went to work. He had the most brilliant, creative mind there ever was. And he figured out a way to try and get his agenda, to get to the point where he could actually be who he wanted to be. And these are some things that he learned. This is my paraphrase. These are things I've learned by study, but most creatures created are trusting. Emotions are very powerful. Distractions can be created. A problem always calls for a solution. And anything is permissible outside of the law. And that is probably the law that we're talking about. And I don't know if that's exactly the way the law was in heaven before sin, but it is the law that we understand. And most all of it was there. But within this law, it says you're to worship God only, right? Well, that would be a problem. That would be a problem for Lucifer. So he would have to try and destroy the law and become equal with God. And how would he do that? Well, if he can't actually be the creator, which he couldn't physically become, he could do something to get on an equal playing field with God, simply by undermining his authority. So he decided to create dissatisfaction, gain support for his claim, and force God's hand. If he could force God's hand, if he could get God to change his mind in anything, he had it. Any one thing. I mean, is that logical? Does that make sense? I mean, is that how, that's how you equal things. You become on an equal playing field if you can force the other who is above you. Yeah, these pictures are really bad. I apologize. In the court of heaven, he would challenge God. And when God would say no, he would become the adversary. A face some of you might recognize. It doesn't matter what is true that counts, but a matter of what is perceived to be true. And that is what has come to be in this world. Let's say, for example, we have a law that we know is constitutional. But for some reason or another, our country seems to be abiding by a law that isn't constitutional. If you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Does it prove that statement? Yeah. You guys know what PRS stands for now? Somebody tell me. Patriarchs and Prophets. It's a book I'm sure everybody here knows. When I read this, I read it, or at least the first parts of it, many times. I went back and read it again yesterday and the day before, and I was like, wow, I saw this. But this is going to be a little bit long. I'm going to read basically parts of 3 pages, not all of them. But in fact, if somebody else wants to read it, somebody that's good at reading real quick. Go ahead, Dana.
He would have had the will of all his creatures free, left none unguarded to the bewildering sophistry by which rebellion would seek to justify itself. Keep going.
Go ahead.
Leaving his place in the immediate presence of the Father, Lucifer went forth to diffuse the spirit of discontent among the angels.
Oh, sorry.
He worked with a mysterious secrecy and for a time concealed his real purpose under an appearance of reverence for God. He began to insinuate doubts concerning the laws that govern the heavenly beings. Leaving his place.
This was the one right before that he read. Okay. If you see in here these 2 words, this is what got me thinking. Bewildering sophistry. Those are kind of words that you don't usually use together. This is what kind of clued me into it. When he says here, diffuse the spirit of discontent, what's he doing? Okay. He worked with, did you read this one? I'm sorry. Yeah. He worked with mysterious secrecy, concealed his real purpose, and disguised it basically in an appearance of reverence for God. He insinuated doubts concerning the laws. If he's insinuating doubts, what's he doing in our PRS theory? Keep that in mind. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Exaltation of the Son of God as equal with the Father was represented as an injustice to Lucifer, who it was claimed was also entitled to reverence and honor.
What's he doing when he does that? What's he doing? Is he creating a problem? Yeah. He's casting doubt. He's creating an issue. Was there any issue before? Go ahead.
If this prince of the angels could but attain to his truth, exalted position, great good would accrue to the entire host of heaven, for it was his object to secure freedom for all. Okay, so what's this then? If he's already creating a problem, what's he doing here? He's creating a solution to the problem, right? We have an issue, guys. We're going to need to do something about it. And if we can just do it, then we would obtain freedom. Freedom from what? Go ahead. But now even the liberty which they had hitherto enjoyed was at an end, for an absolute ruler had been appointed them, and to his authority all must pay homage. Such were the subtle deceptions that through the wiles of Lucifer were fast obtaining in the heavenly courts.
So he's saying that an absolute ruler, didn't they already have an absolute ruler? Right? So what was the difference in his claim? Is he saying that, hey, you know what, something's changed here? In effect, he is, right? Get the mic. Go ahead.
Taking advantage of the loving, loyal trust reposed in him by the holy beings under his command, he had so artfully instilled into their minds his own distrust and discontent that his agency was not discerned.
He cunningly drew his hearers on to give utterance to their feelings. Then these expressions were repeated by him when it would serve his purposes and evidence that the angels were not fully in harmony with the government of God. You guys been watching the news at all? I mean, do you not see a parallel between, what happens? This is your first news story. I mean, he was the one that could get up here on the mic, talk to everybody, and stage the whole thing. He was able to do this. Go ahead.
Thus, while working to excite opposition to the law of God and to instill his own discontent in the minds of the angels under him, he was ostensibly seeking to remove dissatisfaction and to reconcile disaffected angels to the order of heaven.
That's pretty tricky, huh? By the way, your kids missed something. While secretly fomenting discord and rebellion, he with consummate craft caused it to appear as his sole purpose to promote loyalty and to preserve harmony and peace. Doesn't could I attract any of you with something that didn't sound good? It's got to be, doesn't that sound great? It kind of sounds like peacekeepers, doesn't it? That one's tough to read. Basically, I put this in there just because what it does is what you can't read is it's showing that it's a mechanism employed to force change and how unwanted ideals are forced on the people. Okay? Can you guys read enough of that? There's kind of well, that's hard to miss, isn't it? But anybody seen Star Wars? Yeah. I knew you were going to come out. Isn't there kind of a theme going on with Star Wars in that, So the problem here is there's a new dictator, right? Who's the new dictator in this case? Sorry, not that case. Who's the new dictator in heaven? Okay, but who's Satan claiming is the new dictator? Well, the Son, right? Jesus Christ. He's saying that because the Son, I'm assuming that you guys all know the story, so I didn't really get into that, but basically what happens is Lucifer creates enough disturbance in heaven by assuming authority that there has to be a declaration made. And when the declaration is made, God the Father brings him up on the throne and makes him equal with himself. Why the heaven didn't see that already? Maybe they did. Maybe there was some doubt. Maybe they just didn't see it. Maybe it was because Christ was so humble, okay, that it allowed Lucifer to move up in his own eyes. But when God shared the throne with Christ, it was something Lucifer couldn't handle. It blew his whole claim to fame, and he had to support that. So he had to do something about Christ, and he tried to show him as the new dictator, which doesn't sound like a very good word, even though he was God supreme, which technically can be a dictator. He doesn't behave in that way. So the problem is, we've got a new dictator. What's R stand for? Reaction. Everybody's not one happy. Change, where did we hear that word before? Is necessary, right? We've got to make a change. What are we going to have to change? What's the solution? Well, in order to do it, he would have to change the laws and make Lucifer equal with the sun. Now, we know from history that didn't happen in heaven, but it destroyed heaven. It destroyed the peace of heaven. It destroyed a third of the angels, and it created the mess that we're in today. Now, I put his picture back. Nice looking guy, right? Handsome, joyful. He looks like he's got the fruit of the Spirit. That's what you end up looking like when you study negativity all of your life. I put him back up there, born in 1770, only to make this point. Did you guys get the problem, reaction, solution was what was developed in heaven? Did I make that point, or did I? Anybody? I mean, I'm not good at this. This is not my job. So. Are you following me? Okay. He's born in 1770, and he's the one credited with that. Who really developed it? Okay. So him being in 1770 AD tells you what? It's still happening, right? It's still happening. You think it stopped in his lifetime? You are your father the devil. There is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it. Where are we at now? Okay. The beginning of our history. I'm paraphrasing because I'm skipping things up in here, but you know the story. Yea, hath God said, you cannot eat from this tree. What's happening here? Huh? Temptation. But what's he doing? He's making a point. He's undermining God's authority. I'm looking for this. He's going to the left. Somebody read.
We may eat from all the trees except this one, for if we do, we will die.
Okay, what's that? You went from left to right, right?
Ye shall not surely die. Your eyes will be opened, and you will be as gods, knowing good and evil.
So if we do a problem, reaction, solution, what's the end result? Wasn't it, what's that? Compromise, right? Did that make sense? This is exactly what happened again. He's doing this. Satan has done this. He figured out what would work and what wouldn't work in heaven. He figured out that it works on us very well. And it did. And it did here. I don't know if this was another subject that I had to study that probably a lot of people don't, but you know, in order for Nimrod, and again I apologize, next time I'll know what to do on what pictures to use and what not to, but God told people to spread out when they got off the ark. Am I wrong? You know, that was his will for people to fill the whole earth. Nimrod had a different agenda. He had to get them into cities so he could control them. That was the whole thing. Make myself like a god. And he used that same scenario. And he's credited with, you know, starting many secret societies that have lasted to this day. Now, to protect ourselves from this, there are some things that in studying this that I've discovered are true, and there's our ways that we can protect ourselves, and not amazingly, all of them are in the Bible. Even if we as Christians are so shielded from the world as a whole because of what it tries to do to us when we stay within the Ten Commandments and we stay within our church family and we do what we're raised to know what is right. We largely live without ever seeing what's going on because we're in a sense naive, but still protected because we stay within the guidelines God gave us. But here's some principles that will keep us from being deceived by this particular formula. If you believe the Word of God, if you're grateful for what you have faith that God will protect you, keep His commandments, and be diligent to know the truth. That's in the Bible, right? You remember in the New Testament, who was it that was credited with being diligent, with researching what the speaker was saying? But these things, if you have any of them within an organization or within your own life, will allow you to be deceived. If you're fearful, remember when I first put up there, okay? Things that happen on a large social scale, when we're talking changing societies, nations, whatever, usually fear is the thing that's played into it. If they can create, they meaning whoever's trying to make social change that you wouldn't want, okay, whether it be taking away liberties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they can get you off your rocker and get you to be fearful, now you're in the emotional state, okay? If you're apathetic, you won't do anything about it even if you know it's happening, right? If you're unbelieving, if you're rebellious, if you're proud, greedy, or perverted, you may be actually the one trying to do deceiving. You know? We're lucky we have Him. We are very, very fortunate. That's all He wants. Go ahead. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Good. For there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation, ungodly men, turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness and denying the only Lord God and our Lord Jesus Christ. They can't do that if we ask questions. And if there is a deception, then it stands to reason that there's a reason for the deception. It's just, remember in math in school, when you would fill out a problem, what would they do to tell you to check it? You would reverse it, right? This is the kind of questioning we have to do on anything, whether it be religious, biblical, political, whatever. You need to be asking questions. Human beings get easily impressed. Buildings, for example, I myself, I walk up to it and I'm like, wow, this is an amazing work. I feel small. And same with any of these other scenarios. Institutions, hospitals, we tend to trust things that politicians or doctors or professionals of any kind, and we let our guard down in speaking and dealing with them because we make an assumption. We assume, number one, that they know better, and number two, that they care, okay? Which is a really, really big assumption. Who had deceived thee so often as thyself? We deceive ourselves when we assume, okay, when we love our own opinions too much. That's Benjamin Franklin. Go ahead. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. I hope you guys remember what PRS is, okay? So when you leave here, you can look at everything in a different light. All right? God bless you.